my beautiful Weezer queen. How are you this morning?
Hey, I'm amazing. My beautiful psychic sister, partner in true crime. How are you? I'm wearing a Weezer shirt, by the way. That's why.
Yes.
I'm a Weezer queen, apparently.
I love Weezer. It's a very cute shirt. It's very retro. It's very fun.
Thank you. Johnny got it for me because he had to work one of their concerts. I did not get to go, unfortunately, which I'm very bummed about because I'm a huge Weezer fan and I would love.
Have you ever seen Weezer?
No.
Oh,
It's on my list. I've heard they're good. I know.
they're fucking great.
I know. I really want to check them out.
Yeah, get on that shit.
It was very cute. I was wearing the shirt and one of my elderly neighbors one day was like, "Oh, what's that?" And I just
Aww.
I was like, "It's a band."
It's what the kids are listening to
Yes.
30 years ago.
Yeah. The kids. Oh my gosh. How are you, lovely lady? What have you been up to this week?
I'm good. We got to hang, which was so fun and
We
so
did
lovely.
with Donna.
Hey, Donna, love you.
I ate my body weight in cheese. It was amazing.
Yes, it was wonderful. I had a really cute, sappy moment this past week. I re-listened to one of our really early episodes, like episode 16, for something relating to my story to be like, oh, did we cover whatever? Because sometimes that happens. And when you're however many episodes in, you kind of lose track of certain details. And which one? It was wonderful, by the way. The episode was so great and fun. I was like, oh my God, we were great. You know, because I try to not listen to earlier episodes because at least I get very hung up on like, we didn't know
The
what we were
audio
doing and the
quality.
audio
Yeah.
quality and whatever. And no, it was so great. It was so wonderful and charming. And in the episode, I say, it's my dream to go to Sleepy Hollow. I've never been.
Oh.
And I just had such a sweet, like, and it was like such a like, oh my God moment because not only have I been, but we did our first live event in Sleepy Hollow. And it was such a sweet, heartwarming thing. And like, almost like a reminder of, you know, we're all struggling. We're all going through it. We're all, you know, no matter how successful anyone is, there's always that thing of like, well, I could be doing more, you know, be more this, be more that. But just like hearing that is like, no, like where you are, there's a point in time where you wish you were where you are now. So like kind of take a moment and just like be like grateful for that.
That's so sweet. Dreams do come true.
They do. And they happen in Sleepy Hollow, which is amazing.
That's so cute. I love that.
It was really sweet because I had I didn't remember saying that. Obviously that was like 5 years ago, like, or whatever, 4.5 years ago. I didn't, you know, and I was like, oh my God, we did it. We did it, Joe.
We made it. We made it to the Sleepy Hollow.
Yeah, I had that sweet, heartwarming moment.
That's so cute. I love that.
I've been working nonstop and just whenever I have a sliver of time, Ghost UK has been the light of my life. Can't be overstated.
Yes, I have joined you in this. Agree. It's fantastic. And there are a lot of people I recognize who I've seen previously on one of my other favorite UK shows, Taskmaster.
Mm-hmm.
One of the Haleys told me that Matt on the current season was in it, which I was like, okay, immediately. I was already sold, but I'm extra sold now.
Yeah.
And then as I was watching it, I was like, I recognize them. I recognize them.
Oh my gosh, so fun.
Yeah. It's like a lot of really great comedians. So yeah, I'm really enjoying it. It's very funny.
Oh, also, we had our virtual happy hour on Patreon this past week, which was so great, so wonderful. You guys are fucking great.
Wonderful.
How dare you?
Yeah. Be so fantastic.
Yes, and attractive and smart.
To all of you who joined, thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. It like got to the point that Amy was kind of like, I wouldn't be upset about doing this, making this a regular thing. So,
yeah,
you know, if you guys want to join in on the virtual happy hour situation, hang out with us, join us on our Patreon. Also, we got a lot of cool shit coming out in the next couple weeks.
Yeah.
On Patreon. So don't want to miss it. Our first episode of Chim Crazy is out, and it's fucking crazy.
There are a lot of facial expressions.
Yes. Angie, hey queen, thank you for the screenshot of just me and Amy being frustrated and exhausted, recapping the insanity that is Tanya Haddox.
It was amazing.
That bitch needs to be stopped.
She is wild. I can't
Girl,
wait for episode 2 to drop. I know.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's dropping soon. So, girl, you're missing out on all this shit. Jump on that Patreon. Let's do this shit. Let's party.
Yes. I took a lot of your recommendations and I watched quite a few things last week. I watched both Titan submersible docs. I think I fell asleep in the Netflix one, so I need to like go watch the last like 30 minutes.
I really struggled to get through the Netflix one.
There were parts of it that I very much enjoyed. The like audio tests were chilling.
Girl.
Chilling.
And then when you see the difference between Dive 80 and like the rest of them, and you're like,
I'm sorry. All I kept asking while we were watching them was, what?
But like, why?
Yes, but why does this guy have such a hard-on for carbon fiber? Like, do you have stock in the company? Like, let it go, bro. They don't make them out of that for this reason. Like, what?
100%. And I think it's said in the Netflix one where they're like, no, he could have done this safely. He just wanted to do it in a way no one's done it. That was the hard-on he had. He wanted to go to Titanic in a way that no one's done it.
It's like, maybe there's a reason we don't use that material.
But why?
For, deep submersible vehicles.
And that's the thing when I tell people, because the thing that was the most kind of left like a huge impression on me was that it literally was the fail safe of like, we're going to put all of these microphones in this submersible so that we can hear in real time when the carbon fiber is breaking. So then we can adjust our course in real time for safety reasons. And whenever I tell people about this, they're like, yeah, it didn't work. I'm like, no, that's the fucked up thing. It absolutely did work. It did exactly its job, but it can't do its job if you're like, fuck it. Like, it's fine. That's not what it's there for.
It's fine.
That's like being like, there's a fire in your kitchen and you have a fire extinguisher right next to it and you don't use it.
Yeah.
It still works. You just didn't use it.
Yeah. Or the smoke detector's going off and you're like, it's probably fine. I'm not worried about it.
Yeah, I preferred the other one, especially like Josh Gates, who I adore.
Yeah, he was great.
But then how he was like, none of it was fucking operational.
No.
And we were inside the fucking thing.
They left it outside during the winter.
In the freezing temperatures. Oh my God.
They didn't even, like, you couldn't buy a warehouse? You couldn't get a garage somewhere? Throw a tarp over that bad boy? Anything? You just left it out to the elements? Wild. No, all that was wild.
And then it's not like, oh, we didn't know. Like, there's like email, they're literally receipts being like, hey, girl, you can't do that. Like, that's going to fuck this whole thing up. And he was like, or what if we did though? And like, you're like, what the fuck? And I'm laughing because I'm so upset about that situation.
The audacity.
Because it just, none of it was necessary.
No.
And it was just that thing of whoever, if you even remotely brought up an issue, you'd get shit canned immediately.
Yeah. And like, you were basically like dead to anyone who worked there. Like the one girl left and like no one would look at her even.
Mm-hmm.
Very weird.
Yeah. And how like when they got rid of one of their submersible pilots, Stockton Rush, the guy who designed and built the fucking submersible and was the CEO and whatever the fuck, he goes to the fucking accountant, great, you're going to be our pilot now. And you're a woman, they'll fucking love that. And you're like, and she's like, hi, I'm a CPA. What?
I'm not qualified for this. In case you don't know what that stands for.
Like, fucked and insane.
The whole thing was insane.
Yeah.
I also started The Mortician, which is very, very alarming. I think I'm almost all the way through episode 2.
It somehow just keeps getting worse.
It does. It's not great. It's
No.
not great.
No.
I don't know where it's going. I was very concerned that some sort of necrophilia situation was going to be happening. So I was honestly just slightly relieved that they were just like overpacking the bodies in the crematory. The taking the teeth
Girl.
for the gold was a little much, a little intense. Yeah, not a great look.
I mean,
he's very blasé about everything. He's like, they're dead. What were we going to do with it? It's fine.
and like, I can respect that. Like, if that's how you feel, fine. However, you are providing a service and people are paying for the service. So you need to give them the service you're saying that you're going to give them.
Yeah.
It's really that simple. That's how capitalism works.
Yeah. Wild.
And you deciding I'm going to like skirt these things because these bodies don't mean shit to me. Fine. They don't have to, but they do to the person who's paying for the service.
Yeah.
And for the record, this guy's like a top tier piece of shit. Like, so it's not even, but like ultimately, in a parallel way, it's a similar thing with the submersible, right? If you want to make a fucking carbon fiber submersible and go to the Titanic and implode yourself, have fucking fun. It's as soon as you start charging for it,
yeah,
and give fake information as to the service you're providing and the safety with which you're providing this service, that's when it's a fucking problem.
Yeah.
Considering you haven't said one really huge thing that is found out in episode 2, I'm guessing you're not finished with episode 2 because there's a really fucked up thing that you find out. There's a couple really fucked up things that you find out because it just keeps getting worse. I don't know how, but it just keeps getting worse.
I had a feeling. I got to the part where they like set the old crematory on fire.
Accidentally, yeah.
Yeah, accidentally. And then they moved to the new one because apparently everyone's just like doing drugs while they're fucking. Everyone's just like high out of their mind while they're fucking burning these bodies, which like that does not seem like a great idea. Does not seem fun. It seems like you would have a mental breakdown, personally.
I mean, as someone who doesn't partake in recreational drugs, what I'm assuming and what it seems like a little bit was like to deal.
Yeah, but like I feel like the drugs they were picking are not what I would have chosen to like
girl
check out.
Wouldn't know.
That seems like a situation for Xanax, honestly. Were they like smoking crack and stuff? Or were they doing meth? Like what were they doing?
I thought they were just smoking weed. No, it has to be more than that.
I think
I'm a square. This is what I don't remember what it was. But I'm like, you're doing drugs. It's like you're smoking that reefer.
Even that, I feel like that. No. All of that seems terrible. I don't want to be high around a dead body. I'm just going to throw that out there right now.
No, it doesn't sound great. Have you gotten to the point where the other spot is discovered, like found out by the cops?
Yes, and then they like raid it, and all of that's terrible. I think I might have fallen asleep right after that.
Okay. Basically, spoiler, they've burned down the crematorium, so then they decide to start a business, quote unquote, a ceramics business. And they're cremating body in the fucking kilns and like doing like hundreds at a time. And how they're discovered is because one of the neighbors of this quote unquote ceramics company fucking liberated Auschwitz and was like, I know that smell. That's the smell of fucking bodies.
Yes.
That's how they fucking got discovered.
Horrifying. Yeah.
Just gave myself chills.
I fucking forgot that's how they got found out, actually.
Yeah. Because he's like, I will never fucking forget that smell as long as I fucking live. I know that smell. That's not fucking ceramics.
Insane.
And it somehow gets worse from there. It's all bad. I don't understand. I don't understand. I don't understand. It's so much work to be such a piece of shit. Truly.
Yeah. Just do your job correctly. We wouldn't be here.
No.
Yeah, I got to finish that. I also, on Jen, who joined us for the virtual happy hours recommendation,
queen icon.
Yes. Dating a storm chaser, living the dream.
Jen, Amy has said repeatedly to me that you are living her dream life. Just in case that's not abundantly clear, you are.
Yes. I stand by it. I stand by it. But she was so wonderful and so lovely. And she recommended A Body in the Snow, the documentary on the Karen Read case, which I had not been following at all.
It's wild, girl.
It's wild.
The level of corruption is fucked.
So fucking insane.
And the thing is, to me, when people are like, she did it, and I'm like, okay, one, because in case you don't know, Karen Read in her second trial was found not guilty of murdering John O'Keefe, but was found guilty of drinking and driving. Absolutely. She should have been found guilty for that, as well as every other fucking cop involved in this situation, because they're all pieces of shit. But when people are like, she did it, I'm like, okay, one, the prosecution did not prove that, in my opinion, and the opinion of a lot of people, and the burden of proof is on them. Two, if that were the case, why are they submitting doctored evidence then? Like, why are they faking evidence?
Like, so much.
So much. And why do they keep bringing in experts with fake credentials?
Oh my, there was one guy who was just like, it was painful to watch him. That's how bad he was at this. Girl. They look like they just like grabbed somebody from the hallway who had never heard of the case or known anything. They were just like, go, you got it. You're good. You're the expert.
Girl, when you're done with that, watch the testimony. It's like day 18 or 19 of the second trial. They get another witness expert who lied about, and it's like he lied about graduating. And if he didn't lie, it would have been like 17 years that it took him to get a bachelor's. So it's just like, girl, what? It is so insane and brutal. And you're like, how did you do this again? Like, how did you do? And they knew that they knew that the prosecution knew that he had bullshit credentials, because whenever you go to trial and then they bring an expert witness on, they ask the witness, please state your name, where you went to school, what your credentials are. So they bring on this guy and they're like, we're just going to skirt that and see if anyone fucking notices. So like, state your name for the record, moving on. And you're like, excuse me, what? And then the fucking defense already knew this shit, because there's a thing called Google and we live in 2025. And it was like, girl, what do you do? So then they were like, hey, what's up with the fact that your graduation date is different on all of these different resumes? What's up with the fact that like the university you claim to have graduated from doesn't actually have the degree you claim you had? They don't offer that degree. And it's like, girl, like, what the fuck are you talking about? And he's like, oh, I'm in process of like getting the degree now. And it's like, girl, don't even fucking bother. Everyone knows who the fuck you are. You're not going to be hired by anything. You're not going to be hired ever the fuck again.
No.
Because he was the accident reconstruction expert. And they're like, okay, how did his phone end up under his body? And it's like, well, they told me that's what happened. And it's like, no, girl, as the expert, you're supposed to say physically how that happened. That's literally your fucking job.
Yeah.
Girl, it's wild. It's wild as fuck.
So many just insane things. Mm-hmm. Them like flipping the video and submitting the flipped
doctored fucking mirrored evidence video to be like, no, I wasn't anywhere near that fucking taillight.
The broken taillight. What are you talking
on this
about?
Doctored evidence.
Oh my God.
Girl, it's fucked. It's fucked.
Yeah. The defense attorneys are amazing.
Yeah.
When he was like, except you can very clearly see that police on the front of this vehicle is backwards. So let's just flip that video real quick. See what it looks like then. Like, oh, are you standing where the camera can't see you by the broken taillight for a suspicious amount of time, and then you just fuck off out of the garage? Interesting.
And I mean, obviously, like, her attorneys are problematic, and they're like, oh yeah, you know, when we worked on the Kevin Spacey case, girl, are you taking that as a W?
I was like, maybe don't bring that up. Maybe don't mention that.
And one of her attorneys worked on fucking Harvey Weinstein. And it's like, girl.
Come on.
Stop. And like, I understand everyone's entitled to defense, of course. But like, Are we gonna brag about this? They're
Right?
like,
I'd be
I
like, I
defended us.
wouldn't be
Fuck,
mentioning those personally. That's just me.
girl. All that to say, they are excellent at their jobs, clearly, which is
Yeah.
why these rich and powerful men are hiring them for, to get them out of awful shit that they did. But it's
Yeah.
wild. Yeah, Body in the Snow is fucking nuts.
It was insane. Highly recommend. It was very good.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm sure everyone else has seen it because I've been living under a stupid rock, but
You've been working like a fiend, Amy,
that's true.
and hang out with Boo. I understand.
Boo, my little baby. All right. On that note, do you have an exciting paranormal story for me this week?
I sure fucking do, girl. So, sources. Lots of books. I read lots of portions of books for
Ah,
you fine folk. Folklore of West and Mid Wales by J. Cedric Davies. Welsh Folklore by Elias Owen. Martha Morgan's Little World by Brian John. MyN.com, BBC.co.uk. HauntedOhioBooks.com, Wikipedia, and the Ghosts and Folklores of Wales with Mark Reese podcast. So, kids, we're going to fucking Wales, which means there's a fuck ton of Welsh words. I'm
I was
sorry.
just gonna say.
I'm so sorry. My
Oh
God.
my God. Why'd you do this to yourself, Monique?
Because I'm a dumb bitch. That's why.
Oh my God. No, I love you. You're amazing. You love a challenge.
Girl, the amount that I was on YouTube being like, how do you pronounce this word? And me like phonetically spelling it out and be like, we're just going to fucking roll the dice and I'm going to try.
Yeah.
But realistically, right at the tippy top, I'm sorry. So let's get into it. Every country and culture has their own set of folklore and superstitions. However, among the most important of their superstitions are the death omens. In past episodes, we've discussed other harbingers of doom, such as the Screaming Banshees of Ireland, which is the episode I listened to. I believe it's episode 16. Amy covered it, and she did an amazing job, and it's wonderful. If you haven't listened to it, check it out. The Black Moths in Mexico, and the somewhat more universal premonition that death knocks 3 times. And in Wales, one of the most important death omens is the Toily, or the phantom funeral. And a phantom funeral is exactly what it sounds like. Someone in town would see a funeral procession passing along a corpse road. Corpse roads were old roadways that were used for taking dead bodies to the church, chapel, or burial ground. And initially, the observer is convinced that he or she is watching a real funeral taking place. In some accounts out of Pembrokeshire in southwest Wales, witnesses described the funeral procession with extraordinary detail, including familiar faces of townfolk who were partaking in the procession, the identity of the preacher, and the person driving the hearse. They even recalled details of clothing that people were wearing. But then there would be signs that something was off, like the funeral procession would be seen taking place at night, which was unusual since funerals almost always took place during the day, or how many witnesses have reported that no matter how close they got to the mourners, while they could hear the sound of muffled sobbing and shuffling of many feet along the corpse road, they could never quite make out what they were saying, almost as if the mourners were speaking gibberish or another language. Eventually, it would be discovered that there had been no funeral held in the parish that day. However, there would be a funeral held the following day or following week that replicated these details exactly. And it would be then that the witnesses realized that what they had observed was a spiritual foreshadowing of tragedy to come. Alarmingly, there have been several stories of people witnessing their own funeral processions while still alive. One of the most well-known accounts of a phantom funeral occurred in Kilgwyn Mill, when an old woman named Mrs. Davies actually saw her own funeral before it happened. The procession came through the middle of the road and was so large that she actually had to squeeze herself up against the hedge to let the procession pass her. She ran home and told her daughter what she saw and described it in extraordinary detail. However, Mrs. Davies was so rattled by the experience that she took to her bed and went downhill very quickly. Within a few days, she was dead, and according to her family, the details of the phantom funeral, which she had recounted, were replicated exactly with the funeral procession passed from Kilgwyn Mill on its way to Caerslem Chapel, where the burial took place. Another one of these stories was recounted in the book Folklore and Folk Stories of Wales by Marie Trevelyan. In it, Trevelyan shares the following account. A farmer living in the Vale of Glamorgan had a weird experience of seeing his own funeral. He had been to Cowbridge Market and was returning home just before nightfall when he saw a procession coming down the lane, leading from his own house to the highway. His horse appeared to be witnessing the same scene, for the animal halted at the entrance of the lane to allow the crowd to pass. The farmer gazed spellbound as the mourners approached, because immediately after the coffin came his own wife, dressed in the deep mourning of a widow. She was supported by her eldest son. The crowd passed and vanished, and the horse, scared by the scene, rushed up the lane and abruptly halted at the garden gate. Hearing the clatter of the horse's hooves and fearing the animal was riderless, the farmer's wife and son hastened out and were thankful to find the husband safe and unhurt. That night, the farmer was unusually moody and silent. He could not help thinking of the strange scene he had witnessed. A few weeks later, he was seized with a serious illness, from which his family hoped he would soon recover. Quote, "I shall never get up again," end quote, he said. And then he related his recent experience. One of the sons who told me the story said everybody present was unspeakably thrilled. 3 days later, the farmer died.
Interesting. Okay.
While it's possible that the reason these people have seen these ghastly premonitions is because that they are on death's door, and therefore the veil between this world and the next is especially thin, it is said that phantom funerals can only be seen by those with the special gift,
Oh.
as there are several accounts of there being a group of people out together, but only one of them actually sees the funeral. And while this might reek of massive bullshit, apparently it wasn't uncommon for people in Wales to have the gift of second sight. In the book Folklore of West and Mid Wales by J. Cedric Davies, the author states that in the 19th century, in almost every parish in Wales, there was an elderly person who could foretell when a death was going to befall a member of the community. Mr. Davies, no relation to Mrs. Davies, it's just a common Welsh name, apparently. Mr. Davies recounted how a Mrs. Lloyd from Fannin Thadrai in Llangynnog, Carmarthenshire, told the author about an old man named Thomas Harries, who lived in her town and had the gift of second sight. And everyone knew he had this gift because he had an unsettling talent for always accurately predicting every death in the parish. On one occasion, a man named John Thomas called in to see Mrs. Lloyd on his way home. John Thomas worked on the farms and was in very good health, but the following day he became very ill and died shortly thereafter. Turns out Thomas Harries had foretold the death of the poor man a few days before he got sick. He also predicted the deaths of a man named Howells, who was buried at Ebenezer Chapel, of an old woman known as Rossi of Moirevec, as well as the death of one Thomas Thomas. Harries was so accurate in his premonitions that, quote, people were almost frightened to see Harries, as he often foretold the death of someone or other, and his predictions were always correct, end quote.
Leave some mystery. Maybe don't. I don't want to know.
Yeah.
Unless it's something I can prevent, like, keep it to yourself, bro. I don't know what to say. Thank you.
I don't know, because that's the thing, is that I don't actually think it's preventable per se. Because it's not like you're seeing how the person dies. You're just seeing the funeral. You know, and I don't know if it's one of those things of like, there was a really awful movie with Sandra Bullock, like in the early aughts called Premonition. And it was that thing of like,
my God.
She knew that.
Yes.
It was so bad.
Yes. I love Sandra
it. Was.
So I'll watch anything with her.
Same. I love her. It was so bad.
It's no Speed. Let's be real.
What is, girl? What is? I remember going with my friend Josie to see it. And this movie was I was like offended by how bad this movie was. And Josie was, I don't know if that's still the case, but she was definitely more, like a little bit more of a scaredy cat. And in the middle of the movie, I see her eyes are a little bit teared up, and she was like, "Do you want to leave?" And I was like, "Are you serious? Are we literally going to walk out of this bullshit movie because you're scared of this bullshit? This is so bad." I'm like, "What?" Like, if we're going to walk out, it's because this movie sucks, not because you're scared, because this is
I
nonsense.
want that stated for the record, please. Thank you.
By the fucking way. And like, she has a premonition. I think it's that her husband's gonna die, and she like does everything to like prevent that. And in trying to prevent it, she actually causes it. So I don't know if it would be. It's a terrible movie. Don't watch it, or do, and then just like slide into our DMs and tell us how much you fucking hate it. Or if you love it, I love that for you. It was not for me. I thought it was trash.
No
But
judgments.
I'm not gonna yuck your yum if you're into it. So I don't know if it would be like, if it'd be helpful if telling anyone like, "Hey, I saw, that you're gonna die soon." Because then there's also the thing of like, if you don't say it in advance, then you can do that bullshit of like, well, I knew this was going to happen after the fact.
But don't just do it because you want credit, because you want clout. Unless it's like they need to get their affairs in order situation, I guess I could see it's helpful. Otherwise, like, I don't know. I feel like I wouldn't want to know.
Yeah, no, there's not a win to that. Like, there's a great Twilight Zone episode where it's almost like, did you ever see the movie The Frighteners?
I don't think so.
Oh, it's great. It's very fun. It's Peter Jackson, prior to Lord of the Rings, I believe wrote and directed this movie. And it stars Michael J. Fox. And he is like a Ghostbuster, quote unquote, but he's like a con man in that he has like ghost friends, but he basically brings the ghosts in to like haunt your ass and then like gets rid of them because they're like his friends. So it's like a con he's running.
Okay. Love it.
But he has this gift where he can see who's the next person who's going to die because a number will show up on their forehead, like you're the next one. So it's very fun. It's very campy and fun, but also like kind of scary. And there's an episode of the Twilight Zone that's very similar where they're at war, and then this one guy, like your face will start glowing when you're the next one, and he just like starts freaking out. He's like, I can't fucking do this anymore. But like people find out, and the like captain of the platoon will like before they go into battle or whatever will like have him like walk by all the soldiers to be like who's gonna die, and which I can imagine if you're the person who has that knowledge would also like fuck you up.
Yeah.
I don't know. It seems like a very no-win scenario if you can't do anything about it, which I'm assuming it seems like you can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
So while it was common for every Welsh parish to have their own seer, it appears that some churches were known to be sites of phantom funerals. It is said that, quote, there are tales of phantom funerals all over the Diocese of St. David's, end quote, which covers the counties of Ceredigion, sorry, I'm certain that's incorrect, Carmarthenshire and Pembrokeshire, which indeed most of the phantom funeral accounts I found came from this area. The following is a first-hand account that was given to the author of Folklore of West and Mid Wales by a man who witnessed a phantom funeral in Pembrokeshire in the early 20th century. A young man who lives in Gwaun Valley between Pontvine and Fishguard informed me in the autumn of 1905 that he had just seen a phantom or spirit funeral only a few weeks previously. A friend of his, a young porter at a railway station in the neighborhood of Cardiff, had come home ill to his native place of Pembrokeshire. And his friend, my informant, one night sat up by his bedside all night. About 3 o'clock in the morning, the patient was so seriously ill that my informant, in alarm, hurried to call the father of the poor sufferer to come and see him, as the old man lived in a small cottage close by. As soon as he went through the door into the open air, to his great astonishment, he found himself in a large crowd of people, and there was a coffin resting on some chairs ready to be placed on the bier. So a funeral bier is a stand or frame that is used to rest the coffin during the funeral service or wake for viewing. It can also be used during the procession to carry the coffin, or body, if it's not in a coffin, to the burial site. And the whole scene, as it were, presented a funeral procession ready to convey the dead to the grave. When the young man attempted to proceed on his way, the procession also proceeded or moved on in the same direction, so that he found himself still in the crowd. After going on in this manner for about 100 yards, He managed to draw one side from the crowd and soon reached the house of his sick friend's father and nearly fainted. 3 days after this vision, the seer's friend died. And on the day of the funeral, the young man noticed that the crowd stood in front of the house and the coffin resting on the chairs exactly as he had seen in the apparition. The author added that, quote, "My informant who had seen the phantom funeral was so terrified even at the time when I saw him that he was too much afraid to go out at night," end quote. And that the only way the author was able to get this story out of him was because he had a clergyman accompany him on his visit. Another account came from the Reverend John Phillips, the vicar of Llankinvaling in North Carmarthenshire, when he was a boy. While the incident took place 30 years earlier, quote, "Some experiences are so impressive that time itself seems powerless to have faced them from the memory, and of such the following appears to be an instance," end quote. The incident took place in the early spring in the adjoining county of Carmarthenshire. The boy, who was about 10 years old or so, was sitting on a log resting near an isolated house, staring down a long stretch of dusty road that led away past the house. The district they were in was sparsely populated, and you would rarely ever see anyone use that road except on Sundays, where a dozen or so neighbors would take the quiet road to get to and from their place of worship. So the boy was shocked when, on this weekday, in the distance, he saw a large, orderly procession turning the corner and coming straight up the road. He'd never seen such a crowd on that particular road, but as the people drew nearer, he noticed that they were silent and orderly with an air of solemnity. While initially he didn't think anything strange or supernatural was going on, as the crowd got closer, he couldn't help but notice that the large crowd of people was completely silent. It wasn't just that they weren't speaking. They were completely noiseless as their steps made no sounds. About 20 or so yards away from where the boy was watching the procession was a footpath that led away from the road and cut out about a half a mile from the door of a solitary cottage inhabited by a farmhand named Williams, who lived there with his wife and several young children. The footpath could only be traversed in dry weather, and it had rained that day. As the boy watched the crowd arrive at the spot where the path ran on the road, there seemed to be a momentary hesitation. Then the procession turned and veered off the road and took the footpath, which, again, can only be traveled on when it's dry, and it had been raining, so it's impossible to actually travel on it. So the boy's like, what the fuck is going on here? He strained his eyes to see if he could recognize anyone in the crowd, but, quote, there was something strangely familiar about it all. There was also something so dim and shadowy as to preclude the possibility of knowing anyone with certainty, end quote. Then, as the procession curved onto the footpath, the boy saw that the last 4 men in the procession were carrying a funeral bier on their shoulders, but the bier was empty. As soon as the eerie crowd was out of sight, the boy rushed home and told everyone there what he had just experienced. While he initially didn't think that anything paranormal had occurred, his main desire was to find out where the procession was headed. Among the people he recounted this story to at the house was an old dame who had been visiting. Old dames were a class of women who were essentially the town gossip. Apparently, during this time in rural Wales, there were women who would go from farm to farm all day, spilling tea and regaling the housewives with the latest hot goss in exchange for a meal and some money for the road.
I love this. Sign me up. I accept the job offer. Thank you. Also, like, what a classy title, too. Like,
right? The old dame? Yeah. I'll take that shit. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And these women had heard it all. They knew a good story and they knew a believable story. So their bullshit detector was top tier. Not only that, apparently the old dame in question was, quote, immune from all fear, end quote.
Badass bitch.
Yeah, girl.
I love it.
I have a fuck to give. Absolutely.
Yes.
Goals of my life.
Yes.
as she didn't care how far the homes were that she visited, nor how late it would be or how dark it would be out when she left. On this particular evening, the old woman had actually already spilled the latest town tea and was waiting on her payment before heading out when the boy rushed in and told them what he had seen. Quote, no sooner had she heard the lad's strange tale that she flatly declared that no power on earth could move her to travel an inch further that evening. And so, at the expense of much inconvenience to the household, a bed had to be prepared for her, end quote. Because she's like, no,
I'm not
that's
moving.
fucked. I'm not fucking leaving. So pull out the cot.
Yeah. Get me a pillow and a blanket. Let's fucking go.
And we're just going to have a sleepover, bestie. Thank you. However, bright and early the following morning, the old dame traveled far and wide and went house to house sharing the news that a phantom funeral had been seen the previous evening. Her tale made a deep impression throughout the countryside. Those prone to superstition lent a ready ear, while those who prided themselves on common sense expressed doubt in the fantastical tale, with many calling out that the supposed funeral procession was going the wrong way, as it had been seen traveling away from the churchyard. And again, the procession didn't travel in a straight line. It stopped at a wet path that was impossible to travel after it had rained and seemed to veer off. And funeral processions typically kept to high roads so that they wouldn't encounter getting stuck in the mud. And the path this funeral procession was said to have been seen on did not lead to any graveyards or burial grounds. So, with this information, the skeptics called major bullshit and debunked the supposed phantom funeral. Days passed, and when there had been no funeral, the fear of impending death among the townfolk subsided, and everyone just went back to business as usual. However, a few weeks later, Williams, the man who lived in the cottage with his wife and kids half a mile away from the end of the path, got sick. He initially thought that he had a cold and figured that it would pass and that he would be better soon. However, as the days went by and his symptoms didn't lessen, he called for a doctor. But the doctor lived 6 miles away and wasn't able to see the infirmed man until the 5th day of his illness. When the doctor arrived, he found that Williams had a case of double pneumonia and that he was too far gone to be able to help the sick man. A few hours later, Williams drew his last breath. 3 days later, his funeral took place. Williams was a very popular man, and as was customary in the country, neighbors from near and far came to attend the funeral, and on their way, a group of men called at the burial place for the funeral bier. This group was joined by others, so that long before the deceased's home was reached, the procession was a large one. It traveled up the long stretch of road where the boy had watched the mysterious crowd in the twilight 6 weeks earlier. That same boy watched this procession. And when the group reached the point where the footpath branched away across the fields, the man who acted as the leader stopped and raised his hand, causing the procession to stop momentarily. The leader then looked at his watch, then speaking in a low, clear voice said, quote, "Men, it is already getting late. If we go round by the road, it will get very late. We will take the path," end quote. He then led the way, and as his followers swept around the curve, the boy saw that the last 4 men in the procession carried on their shoulders an empty funeral bier. This validated the boy's experience of the phantom funeral. However, unlike in the other accounts of a phantom funeral, in this incident, the vision the boy saw was not of the men carrying the body to be buried in the churchyard, but rather they were going to the departed's home to pick up the body beforehand, which is interesting to think of, that maybe there's someone else in town who saw the phantom funeral procession maybe like later on in the procession.
Yeah.
I couldn't find any information if that were the case, but I mean, it would be interesting if that were so. While stories of phantom funerals in the United States are relatively rare, they still exist.
Oh, shit. Okay.
Yeah, girl. One account published in the Cincinnati Enquirer on November 17th, 1889, talks about the ghost of a suicide victim named Weidmeyer, who was unhappy with the sight of his grave. His ghost knocked on his neighbor, Mr. Keelsing's door, and beckoned for the man to follow. Here is part of the account.
No. I'm
And
good.
you're like,
Thank you.
I think I'm
gonna stay
good.
home. You have fun with that.
I just took my pants off. Like, I think I'm just in for the evening. You know what I mean? Thank you so much, though.
Also, no solicitors. Like, I have a sign. Thank you.
That'll yeah. Nervy as he is, Mr. Keisling could not obey the summons, which under any and all circumstances during life he would not have refused his old friend and neighbor, whom he had known so well for the last quarter of a century. Closing the door, he seated himself, thinking of what had just occurred, and of the meaning of such a strange visit. A loud rap again called him to the door. Forgetting for a moment his late visitor, he obeyed the summons, when a sight met his eye that froze him to the spot. The atmosphere was lighted with a strange light for a distance up and down the road, and a funeral procession, exactly like the one attending the funeral of his late neighbor, was passing his house, only it was going away from the graveyard instead of toward it. For a few moments, his eyes were riveted on the strange scene, and in another moment, all had vanished. What did it all mean? That was the question that bothered and troubled this sturdy old farmer, until, in relating his experience to some of his neighbors, the next day he found that they had seen and heard strange things, and after consulting with each other, it was determined to remove him, Weidmeyer, at once, hoping in so doing to rest his troubled spirit and relieve his terror-stricken neighbors. And that are just some of the many, many tales of phantom funerals.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
I had not heard of this.
Mm-hmm.
It does kind of remind me of Daniel Stern's Celebrity Ghost Story a little bit.
Oh.
Daniel Stern, if you don't remember, plays Marv in Home Alone. I'm sure you know that.
He's amazing. Yes. And he's in City Slickers and he's wonderful.
Yes. So he and his wife went on vacation, I don't think to Wales, but I want to say to the UK at least.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to look it up a second ago. Whitcomb, I think is how you pronounce the name of the town. And
who the fuck knows? I'm sorry. We don't know. We're American. I'm sorry.
Yes. Sorry. For dumb Americans, it's fine. So he and his wife go to visit this town and they see what kind of seems to fit the description of the phantom funeral, where it's like everyone's dressed in mourning colors.
Mm-hmm. But it's like in a cemetery, right?
Yes. No? And no one's talking. It's like completely silent. They can't see anyone who looks like they're just like wearing normal clothes. Like it's everyone who is in these very old-timey, dark clothes. I almost covered it one time, but then if you go to that town's website, they're like, this is bullshit. Like, this is what they have some reasonable explanation. And they're like, we're obviously a town with people. Hi, hello.
Right.
But it kind of reminds me of that a little bit. Obviously, him and his wife were fine. No one died after that.
Right.
But this is very, very weird.
Yeah. And in the Banshee story that you covered, which again is wonderful, I highly recommend re-listening to that. There's like a thing also of like the Headless Horseman is also kind of tied to it. And
yeah.
And I bring up Darby O'Gill's and the Little People, that very traumatizing live action Disney movie, where I want to say it's a headless carriage that shows up after the Banshee to come take Darby's daughter to the underworld. So it's like a little adjacent. Also, something that I neglected to mention that I thought was worth noting regarding this reputation that Wales has a lot of people who can predict things and have premonitions. Aberfan is in Wales.
Oh, shit. That's right.
Yeah. And I believe that the people who predicted it, the Aberfansiers, were in London, I want to say. But it seems like there's some spooky psychic shit happening in Wales. And well, I guess but like in Wales.
I could believe that. They're very tied to like the Fae and
Yeah.
druids and stuff. So like none of this really is surprising to me.
So in researching this, a concept that came up also was like, this is also known as like goblin funerals, and it's almost like the Fae fucking with you
Oh,
in some way.
I could believe it. Apparently they like to fuck with you. They're very tricky.
Yeah. And just being like, hey, we're coming to get you.
We're the Fae.
Yeah. I don't know. I just found it very fascinating. And just even the concept of that the funerals would either be like dead silent or they couldn't make out what they were saying. Almost like it's, like the language of the dead, or
Yeah.
like I remember I want to say it was like one of those like psychics like John Edward or whatever the fuck, when they were like called out about, getting shit wrong, which like, I don't know if you believe it or if they're even real or not or whatever the fuck. But one of them, I remember saying that it's like you're talking to someone underwater and you're trying to make out what they're saying.
Interesting. Okay.
Like some of it is like guessing because you can't really make it out. You can make out like a little bit and you're just trying to fill it in. And it kind of reminded me of that as well, of like, it's like, I can't quite understand what you're saying, even if I'm like, literally you're passing right in front of me. But I don't know. It's just really fascinating. I found the whole thing really fascinating.
Yeah. Way more accounts of this than I thought there were going to be.
Oh,
I'm sure this is
like
a fraction.
A handful.
Yeah.
It's a fraction. And it's like, it's crazy. Like, you're like, what the fuck?
Okay.
Yeah. And because like, even in the different books, I'm like, okay, so it's going to be like the same, like 4 counts, like in every book. And it's like, nah, girl. It's like completely different counts.
Like we got a boatload. Thank you.
And I want to say I found one and I like couldn't re-find it, which is why I didn't include it. But I want to say I read an account of a father and son traveling on the road, and the father saw the phantom funeral and the son didn't. And the father was like pressed up against the fucking hedge because there's this funeral going by. And the son was like, literally, what the fuck are you talking about? And then like the next day, a funeral like went by like the exact same road and the whole bit in the town.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And just the amount of accounts, I kind of have difficulty just like writing it off.
Yeah.
Because there's so many accounts.
Okay. Something's going on in Wales. All right.
It's very fascinating.
I loved that though. I had no idea. Thank you so much for that story.
For sure.
Are you ready to get into our true crime story?
I am, girl. Let's do it.
Amazing.
I'm ready. Do I need to get a bevy? Do I need a white knuckle it? What are we doing?
No, I think you're going to be okay.
Okay. This isn't like when you did like the nice story of
that wasn't
of
nice.
Duncan that was
McPherson.
Like the most horrific thing I've ever heard in my life. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
No. I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, it is the true crime portion, so like it's never great.
Of course.
Usually, but I think it's going to be okay. I think everyone's going to be okay.
Great.
The only thing I will say is, again, trigger warning for mentions of suicide, because my first source is Accident, Suicide, or Murder, Season 5, Episode 1. Spoiler, it's murder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of times.
I will say I watched a bunch of episodes of that show, and it got me good one time because they presented a case where I was like, I mean, it's obviously murder. Like, why is this even on the show? There's no way this isn't murder. And then it wasn't murder. I was like, okay, I see why it's on the show now. Thank you.
I mean, it's very infrequent.
Yeah.
Like the story, I'm blanking on the woman. I want to say she was Australian and that she kept having babies and they would die. And I was like, well, she's clearly murdering her kids. And it was like, no, there's just a genetic. And she was like sent to prison, like, I think forever.
Yeah.
And then it was like, no, she's just genetically, like, there's a genetic mutation that unfortunately these kids just fucking die.
Yeah.
And then she got out a couple of years ago. Thank fuck. But the thing is, it's like, if people weren't such pieces of shit.
Yeah.
Then, we wouldn't be in the position of just being like, it's probably murder because statistically, let's be fucking real.
Yes.
Because people are the worst.
Yes. Other sources include Oxygen.com, ABC News, KHG.com, Spokesman.com, and the Seattle Times. Barbara Stoltz and Gary Loesch met and fell in love in Sacramento, California. The two got married in 1969 and had their first child, a boy named Chuck, the following year in 1970. 2 years later, in 1972, Barbara gave birth to their daughter, Tina. They were described as a stereotypical middle-class American family. Mom, dad, one boy, one girl. In the late 70s, the family of four moved to Spokane Valley, Washington. Barbara was very kind and patient. She worked as a nurse's assistant and spent a lot of time in convalescent homes, caring for the elderly. While Gary worked in the video amusement industry, supplying arcade games, pool tables, and pinball machines to various businesses.
Oh, fuck. Okay.
Right? Which, like, as a kid, fucking jackpot.
What a job.
Yeah. Because apparently he would bring home video games for Tina and Chuck.
Oh my God. Yep. It's a fucking dream.
They basically had a full-on arcade in their driveway.
Fuck yeah.
Yep. Eventually, Tina and Chuck grew up and moved out, and Tina gave birth to a son when she was 18, named Christopher. Barbara and Gary moved across the state line to Post Falls, Idaho, and seemed to enjoy their empty nesting after Tina and Chuck had left. Never one to shy away from hard work, though, Gary picked up a side gig in 1992 delivering newspapers in the morning. But 3.5 years later, on November 13th, 1995, tragedy struck the family when 65-year-old Gary was shot and killed during his morning paper route.
Fuck.
Girl, this whole story was bananas. Bananas. Yes. A nearby resident and his girlfriend were woken up by what sounded like a gunshot around 3:30 in the morning and the sound of a car speeding off along the gravel road. But they didn't think anything of it at first. When they got up around 6 a.m., they noticed a car parked in the middle of the road with its lights on and the driver's side window rolled down, despite the fact that it was raining. When the car was still there an hour later and the lights had started to dim as the battery ran out, they became concerned and called police. Chuck and Gary's brother Randy had gotten worried when Gary wasn't back by 5:30, his usual time, and since they knew his paper route, decided to drive along it and see if they could find him. When they located his car, police were already on the scene. They were immediately informed that Gary was deceased and they should go home.
Ugh.
I know. When they got back to the house, Barbara was in hysterics, having already heard the news, and the family was devastated. They assumed it had been a robbery gone bad, but according to the police, there were no signs of a struggle and no indication that he had been robbed.
What the fuck?
There was no weapon at the scene, and the only evidence they found were a couple of cigarette butts nearby. Barbara and Tina were interviewed, and both appeared to be in shock. Neither one could think of anyone who would do this. Gary had no apparent enemies, and no one had a motive to kill him. According to Randy, quote, he knew everybody and got along with everybody, end quote. Chuck said he knew he was suspect number one because he'd arrived at the scene before being notified of his father's death, but denied that he had anything to do with the murder. His uncle Randy was also considered a suspect since he'd been with Chuck when he arrived. The police took DNA samples from Chuck and Randy to compare with the DNA found on the cigarette butts. Neither was a match, though, because the DNA on the cigarettes was determined to have come from a female. However, the sample wasn't a high enough quality to get a full genetic profile. The police didn't have any evidence to link any particular person to Gary's murder, and the case eventually went cold. A little over 2 years later, on January 11th, 1998, Randy and his wife Laura requested a welfare check on 52-year-old Barbara. Laura and Barbara spoke constantly, but she'd been unable to reach her for 3 days, and when the two stopped by her house, they noticed the back door was open. They were concerned because Barbara lived alone and had been suffering from depression in the wake of her husband's death. Fearing the worst, Randy didn't want to go in the house alone. Officer McLean and Officer Hogue arrived on the scene and were already familiar with the Loesch residence because of the murder of Barbara's husband. When they went inside, McLean said there was no indication of a struggle, and everything seemed normal. They began to check the house, but there was no sign of Barbara. Randy was upstairs when they heard him yell, "Oh fuck, she's in the spa." There was a hot tub out back, and when they went to check, there was a really nasty decay smell, and they could see someone floating in the hot tub.
What the fuck?
Monique, you are not prepared.
Clearly the fuck not.
Randy confirmed that it was Barbara. It looked as though she'd been in the hot tub for several days and her body had already started to decompose. Hogue said, quote, "It was one of the worst death scenes that I had ever experienced," end quote.
Especially in like bodies in water, and then
Yeah.
you have the heat to it.
Yeah.
Oh no.
I can't imagine.
No. Mm-mm.
They noticed that there was also a TV floating in the hot tub and wondered if she'd knocked the TV into the hot tub and was electrocuted, whether accidentally or intentionally as a means to end her life. Brandy had mentioned that she'd been suffering from depression and had some other medical issues as well. She had high blood pressure and was dealing with some recent changes in medication. The TV was plugged into a 25-foot extension cord, but when police followed it into the garage, they discovered that the extension cord wasn't plugged into an outlet, much to their surprise. They wondered if maybe she set the TV up, then suffered a medical episode and collapsed in the hot tub before she'd had a chance to plug it in. But they also considered the possibility that someone had unplugged it after she'd been electrocuted. They were suspicious, but hoped an autopsy would give them some insight into what had happened. Randy was extremely upset, and Laura was hysterical. They'd still been recovering from Gary's death 2 years before, and now Barbara was dead as well. Seeing how distraught the couple was, the police decided to give them some time before bringing them in for questioning. So Randy and Laura were excused to start notifying the rest of the family. When Chuck heard the news, he was an emotional train wreck and didn't want to believe it. Since he no longer lived nearby, he immediately tried to get a flight out in the midst of an ice storm to be with his family. Unfortunately, Barbara's autopsy didn't give investigators much information. Her body had been in the hot tub too long and was too decomposed for a toxicology test. There were no obvious injuries or marks on her body that would indicate physical abuse or a struggle. There was obviously water in her lungs, and the medical examiner suggested that it was likely an accidental drowning. But the official cause of death was ruled as undetermined. The autopsy left a lot of unanswered questions. Police considered that maybe she'd passed out or fallen asleep or suffered a medical episode and simply drowned, and as it was happening, the TV got knocked in. But due to some of the things they'd seen on the scene, they weren't ruling out the possibility of homicide, especially since Gary had been murdered. Murders weren't common in their small town, which led investigators to believe this was more than just coincidence, and knew they needed to determine whether there was a connection between Barbara and Gary's deaths. So they started working with the Kootenai County Sheriff's Department and Detective Sergeant Brad Maskell, who had handled Gary's case. Both police departments couldn't find anything that seemed to connect the two deaths, but Officer McLean said they refused to give up on Barbara's case. They talked to Barbara's daughter, Tina, who lived in a nearby county, since the two were close, wondering if Barbara had told Tina anything that would shed light on the case. Tina agreed to meet with police, but asked authorities to schedule a time to talk to her at a later date, since she was still grieving. So authorities focused on interviewing other members of Barbara's family. Chuck was brought in for questioning, as well as his grandfather, Frank Stoltz. Neither could think of anyone who would have a reason to kill Barbara. Frank said, quote, "She was a loving person. Everybody liked her," end quote. But they did mention that Barbara had been very generous with other family members after Gary's death. After loaning money to several people from Gary's life insurance payout, she was essentially broke, and Barbara's parents had been paying the mortgage on her house. Chuck told authorities that Randy had been one of the family members who owed Barbara money, but that he'd been working off his debt. However, investigators were immediately suspicious. Randy had been a person of interest in Gary's murder and would have benefited from Barbara's death because his debt would have been wiped clean. And since he and his wife had been the one to call the cops in the first place, police began to suspect that he might have had something to do with Barbara's death. They also found it especially suspicious that Randy had refused to enter the house without the police and thought it was odd that he'd gone to the police station to make the report for the welfare check instead of just going in to check himself.
Yeah.
The police interviewed Randy and his wife Laura together and asked him why he wanted someone to go in with him. He told them the situation had raised red flags for him, and if something bad had happened, as he suspected was the case, he didn't want to find her alone. Laura, in defense of her husband, further explained that when the police were investigating Gary's death, they'd accused Randy of the murder, and they'd felt he'd been treated poorly during that investigation and didn't want to go through that again. With nothing concrete to tie him to the crime, though, they began looking for anyone else Barbara may have given money to that would have benefited from her death. Police still wanted to talk to Tina. Although she had initially agreed to the interview, she kept rescheduling it or just wouldn't show up. They started to think that she was avoiding meeting with them. And when they eventually received a call from an attorney representing Tina, they became even more suspicious. Chuck said, quote, "When I found out my sister refused interviews, that threw up big red flags for me that she may be involved. After my mother passed away, my sister Tina did show up at the house for a brief period of time. From what I remember, she was sad but indifferent," end quote. So investigators began looking into Tina. They discovered that she'd been a difficult teenager for Barbara and Gary. She'd stolen checks from them and written bad checks, and had been in and out of jail for many years for check fraud.
Girl.
Yep.
Girl.
But Barbara and Gary still supported their daughter as much as they could and had helped raise Christopher while Tina was incarcerated and loved their grandson very much. However, tensions in the family grew after Tina began a romantic relationship with a woman she'd met in prison in 1991 named Sky Hansen. Sky had been involved in a lot of drug manufacturing and dealing and was, quote, "well known by state police," end quote. After they were released, the two planned to start a business together, painting and renovating homes, and had gone to Barbara for some money to get it up and running. Barbara had wanted to support Tina, but Gary didn't approve of Sky and had wanted to separate the two women. Gary told Tina that she needed to choose between her family and Sky, but their relationship was unbreakable, and Tina inevitably chose Sky. Her decision angered Gary, who retaliated by changing his will so that Tina would receive only $1. I know. Savage burn.
I was going to say, I was like, girl, you better be damn sure what's in that fucking will before you're doing some crazy ass shit.
Right?
Just saying.
Somehow, to me, the leaving $1 is like so much more of a fuck you than cutting you out completely.
For sure.
It's be like, that's what I think of you. You're worth $1. Enjoy.
Yeah. Although recently I know someone wanted to do that in my life, was like having to redo their will, and was like, I'm going to leave this one person who's been nothing but a fucking nightmare to me and my family $1 to be like, see, you're in the will. Like, what's the issue? But then the lawyers were like, don't do that. Don't do that. Because then they can like litigate and do a bunch of crazy shit. It's way worse than if you just don't leave them anything.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
And like, I get it of like, I can understand it, but being a Scorpio who like in my lowest vibrational self is the petty bitch, I'd be like,
yeah, I love it.
Keep the change.
Enjoy. That's for you.
Yeah.
I would also make a stipulation that it needed to be paid in pennies because that's my level of petty. Like, yes.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. I think about the scene in First Wives Club. Have you seen that magnificent movie?
I don't think so, actually.
Girl, it's so good. Oh my God. It's so good. So good. And it's like, I'm sure the runtime is like 90 minutes because like the 80s and 90s had that, like, we can have multiple story arcs and like complete that shit in 90 minutes. Fucking amazing. It's Goldie Hawn, hot as fuck, Diane Keaton, and Bette Midler are all friends from college who meet because a friend of theirs died by suicide. Like, they meet at the funeral after like many years of not seeing each other, and they're all going through divorces, and they all are in different parts of their, you know, careers in life, whatever. So Goldie Hawn is a famous actress, and her husband was a producer and like was like fucking around on her with a woman named Monique, which it was like the first time I ever heard my name. And I was like, how dare you? No, this is terrible.
I would never.
Oh no, the woman's name isn't Monique. The role that they're both after in this movie is Monique. Whatever, it's fine.
Oh, okay.
So and it's a whole thing where they like have to like sell the assets and then split it evenly.
Okay.
And then Goldie Hawn, and like basically they all like conspire to do these like shitty things because their husbands are like super shady and whatever fuck. So Goldie Hawn ends up selling all of their assets for $1. And she's like, well, I thought given our life, our history. Like, I thought $1 was more than terribly fair. So she like hands him 50 cents and she's like, all right, take it all. And it's
Okay, wait, I love that. Okay.
First Wives Club is amazing.
I
It's
gotta go watch this.
amazing.
I don't know how I missed this. Okay.
It's amazing. Because
Okay.
you were probably like real young. Because it's like mid-90s.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's feel good. It's
Okay.
great. Cannot recommend enough.
I mean, I love Goldie Hawn, so sold.
Absolutely. It's fantastic.
After Gary's death, though, it seemed like Tina was trying to get close to her mother again. And during that time, Barbara had given Tina well over $100,000 for the business.
Yeah, girl.
Yep.
Girl.
Mm-hmm. And when investigators discovered that there was a $500,000 life insurance policy on Barbara.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yep. And that Tina was the sole beneficiary,
Girl.
they began to focus on Tina and Skye as the culprits.
Mm-hmm.
Because they clearly know what the fuck is up.
Yep.
Although they had determined a possible motive, there were no witnesses or physical evidence that tied either woman to the crime. Since the cause of death was still listed as undetermined, Tina was unable to collect the insurance payout.
I'm sorry, what time is this again? What time period is this again?
This is 98.
Okay.
Because in order for the insurance policy to be paid, Barbara would have needed to die by accident or by natural causes. Yep. However, because there was no evidence that this was a homicide, Tina's attorney claimed that they had to list the cause of death as what the pathologist had suggested on the autopsy report: accidental drowning. So the cause of death on the death certificate was officially changed from undetermined to accidental drowning.
Get the fuck out of here.
Yep. Allowing Tina to cash out her mother's $500,000 life insurance policy. Chuck said he was very angry with his sister when he found out. Quote, "Everything in my head came to the conclusion that my sister had involvement in everything, both my father's death and my mother's death." End quote.
And like, something that's kind of so fucked is like, she's going to blow through that money in like 3 months, if that.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like, great, I'm set, my life is whatever. No, like that. If she already hit up her mom for $100,000 in like
It's gonna be gone.
a very short period of time, yeah, she's blown through that money in a second.
Yeah. Once she received the insurance payout, Skye, Tina, and Tina's 9-year-old son, Christopher, disappeared a few days later. Police had no idea where they went, and McLean said, quote, "They just basically fell off the face of the earth," end quote. And Christopher's whereabouts were one of their biggest concerns. Authorities tried to locate Tina and Skye. They checked border crossings and flights. There were no taxes being filed, no forwarded mail. They'd hidden their tracks well. Even if they found Skye and Tina, though, with the official cause of death now listed as an accident, authorities would be unable to pursue murder charges unless they had new evidence or testimony. So the case hit a standstill. Now, according to the show, it's a year later that this next series of events occurs. However, the news article I read implied that it was 5 years later. So I'm a little uncertain about the timeline.
Okay.
Regardless, in Clarkston, Washington, which is basically like right across the border from Post Falls, Idaho, where they lived, Bradley Steckman, who was facing murder charges for the suffocation of an 89-year-old Pullman woman during a 1996 jewel heist in her home, told authorities he had information on Barbara's death and agreed to share what he knew in an attempt to lessen the murder charges he was currently facing. Turns out, Steckman worked for Tina and Skye's company. So the next day, investigators from Post Falls went to interview him about what he knew about Tina and Skye. Steckman claimed that he was there the night Barbara died, and that Tina had been there as well. He said the plan was to make it look like an accident. Skye had hatched the plan and recruited Steckman to help carry it out. She'd offered him $10,000, but told him they'd do it with or without him, although he admits that he was never paid.
Of course not.
Of course not.
Don't trust a criminal.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah. Steckman said Tina plugged in the extension cord while he set the TV on the hot tub. He stuck a pencil in the back of the set to bypass the electrocution safeguards and had added sea salt to the hot tub to improve the conductivity of the water. All three of them got in the hot tub together. After a while, he got out to go to the bathroom, and when he came back, Tina got out of the tub. Steckman then proceeded to pretend to trip and fall, knocking the TV into the hot tub in the process. Barbara was electrocuted, which caused her to lose consciousness. Steckman then unplugged the TV so that Tina could finish the job by holding Barbara underwater until she died. Steckman said he told Tina she needed to hold her under for at least 2 minutes. How fucking horrifying.
I couldn't imagine.
No.
I couldn't imagine any of this.
No.
And all this, again, for a little bit of money.
For a little bit of money. Why? Why? My only consolation is like, because she was unconscious before all this and they made it look like an accident, Barbara did not know that her daughter was a piece of shit who murdered her. If that's any consolation. It's not really, but what the fuck?
I'm just speechless. That is so... people are the fucking worst.
People are the worst. I can't imagine.
No. And then planning this out. Like,
yes!
Like, I think about the things I plan out in my life, and it's not murdering people.
No.
Like, what the fuck?
So fucked. And after, like, she helped you out, gave you all this money, watched your kid while you were in jail.
Is there a substance abuse issue here, or is it just audacity?
That was not mentioned.
Okay.
Perhaps after getting involved with Skye, who was known for being involved in the drug trade, maybe that was a thing. Speculating wildly. I did not read that anywhere. That was not
She
mentioned.
was already a piece of shit prior to. She's just a piece of shit. Got it. I'm just trying to find some iota of humanity in this person.
I got it.
It's like, no, they're just terrible. They're just the worst. And it's the thing that it's like entitlement of like, yeah, I should have more. You should have done more for me. I should have more money.
What the fuck?
How fucking dare you? Fuck you.
What the fuck?
Fuck. I hate people.
No, this is so upsetting and tragic and just like, again, what the fuck? Authorities then questioned Steckman regarding Gary's murder, wondering if Tina and Skye had been responsible for that as well. He told them that Skye had asked him to find locations on Gary's route that would be the best place to kill him. He claimed Skye had wanted to kill Gary so that Tina could get closer to her mom. Because remember, they were not really talking at that point because of the tensions.
This is so fucked.
So fucked. Beyond scouting the location of the crime, though, Steckman claimed he had not taken part in Gary's murder. Although he was not there, he said he was 100% sure that Skye had been the one to shoot Gary. And remember, the cigarette butts had female DNA. Police were also still concerned about Christopher's safety and whereabouts and asked Steckman if he had any information on the boy. He claimed he didn't know where Christopher was, but said, quote, "I hope he's still alive," end quote, which full on gave me chills in the episode.
So wait, so like to this day, they don't know where he is.
We're going to get into that, but spoiler,
okay.
They don't know where he is. Just wait.
Girl, okay. I'm like gripping the wall. I have my head in my hands.
All of that is valid. Yes.
Girl.
Insane. Police wanted to obtain arrest warrants for Tina and Skye. So if they were stopped by law enforcement anywhere in the U.S., they would be arrested and brought back to stand trial for Barbara's murder.
Fuck yeah.
I didn't really understand this next part because I feel like I'd never heard of this before. But apparently the prosecutor at the time felt that Steckman's testimony would be co-conspirator testimony, which they determined was not going to be allowable in the courts.
Is this a state thing?
I don't think so. I feel like maybe it's like on a case-by-case basis is kind of, because I could not find like just a blanket law.
Right. Because I'm like, isn't that how a lot of people are found out? Is that the person flips on them?
Correct. which is why I was so confused. And like, I tried Googling this, and like, no phrase I was Googling ever really like came up with an answer. If somebody knows why this was the case, please let me know. I genuinely was very confused.
Yeah, slide into those DMs.
But apparently, they couldn't use Steckman's confession to obtain arrest warrants. So once again, the case hit a standstill. And I'm going on the timeline in the episode at this point. 9 years passed with no new leads on the location of Tina, Sky, and Christopher. During this time, McClane had been promoted to lieutenant and decided to give the case another look. Wanting a fresh set of eyes on it, he asked Officer Paul Farina to look into it. Farina knew they would need the public's help to locate Tina and Sky, and suggested that they reach out to America's Most Wanted to see if they would feature the couple on an episode. However, they knew the show wouldn't be able to feature the story unless there were warrants out for their arrest. And again, I couldn't really find out exactly how they managed to get them after all this time, but apparently they did. And on October 10th, 2008, police finally issued first-degree murder arrest warrants, including bonds of $5 million each for Tina and Sky. And America's Most Wanted agreed to feature the story.
Fuck yeah.
A few hours after the episode aired, McClane was notified by police in Pima County, Arizona, that they'd found Tina and Sky.
Yes.
Which is insane to me. This case has gone unsolved for 10 fucking years. They couldn't figure out what they were, and they literally just like put them on a program, and then a couple hours later, like, oh, hey, by the way.
100%.
We got it.
Well, that's the John List thing, too.
Yeah.
That was like decades.
Yeah.
And like, hey, that's my fucking neighbor, bro. And they didn't even have a picture. They had like a bust of like, what he probably looked like.
And people were like, you could have just like asked me, bro. Like, I knew who he was the whole time. I didn't know you were looking for him.
Yep.
Insane. They were found in the desert. Unfortunately, they were both dead in what appeared to be a murder-suicide.
Fuck off.
Authorities were immediately concerned for Christopher, but he was not with them. They found Tina in the backseat with a gunshot to her head. Sky was in front of her in the driver's seat and had also been shot in the head. Tina was found holding the gun, and Arizona authorities said the couple had a suicide pact. They left an 8-page suicide note that offered insight into the killing of Barbara Loesch.
So it's 8 pages. How many times can you say I'm a piece of shit in 8 pages?
Right? Also, from what I can tell, it doesn't seem like they claimed responsibility for Gary's
Of course
death.
not.
Maybe they did.
Of course not.
Police would not release the details of the suicide note. They only made like certain comments.
Sure.
So it's unclear, but it kind of only seems like they fessed up to Barbara's murder. The note said nothing regarding Christopher or his whereabouts, and he was 18 years old at the time. McClane said it was a slap in the face. They had wanted them to face trial for Barbara and Gary's murders. Police discovered that Tina and Sky had been living in Tucson, Arizona at the time and were using the names Katie and Dawn respectively, but there was no record of the women changing their last names. Authorities interviewed several Tucson area friends of Tina and Sky, one of whom had met up with the women a few days before they'd been found dead. According to their friend, Tina and Sky had said they'd seen themselves in a commercial for America's Most Wanted and, knowing they were going to be featured in the show, allegedly said they would rather kill themselves than go back to prison. Police went to their residence hoping to find Christopher. The home was being renovated and all of their belongings were in the garage boxed up. Underneath, they noticed dryer sheets. Hundreds and hundreds of dryer sheets. Believing they were trying to cover up the odor of something and fearing the worst, they dug up the area. But no remains were found, and Christopher's whereabouts were still unknown. Information police uncovered was that he was in the Tucson area in late 1999. He was sent to live with his father about a year after that due to behavioral problems. Neighbors in Arizona reported seeing him in the months before the deaths of Sky and Tina, but no one knew where he had gone. Maskell believes that Christopher Loesch is very likely deceased, murdered by Sky and Tina.
Yeah.
Chuck, however, believes he may be in another country. He said, quote, "I have a tendency to believe he is in Belize. My sister and her girlfriend had connections there," end quote. Bradley Steckman was serving concurrent life sentences for the 1996 murder, as well as his part in Barbara Loesch's murder, but he died in prison in 2012. Chuck said he misses his parents every day, but you just have to keep going. He has a strong will to survive. He's glad at least some of the questions surrounding his parents' death were answered, and that the rest of his family doesn't have to live in fear any longer. Sky, Tina, and Brad are no longer capable of harming anyone else. Quote, "The way I see it, karma served justice in all of this," end quote. Christopher Loesch is still considered an active missing persons case, and anyone with information regarding him or his whereabouts should call the Post Falls police. And that is the story of the murder of Barbara and Gary Loesch by their daughter and her girlfriend.
Not to be a wet blanket, I don't think karma did shit, actually. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that.
I think they got away with it and they did whatever the fuck they wanted.
Yeah.
Now, like, are these deeply miserable, soulless shells of a human being and they had to live every day being that? Yeah. And I can imagine that that's
Yes.
suboptimal and a bummer. Fuck these people. I hate them.
I mean, same. Correct. The audacity.
The audacity of just being like, yeah, I'm owed this.
Yeah.
Obviously.
I just like can't imagine. And like knowing your entire family already suffered through the death of your father, the murder of your father.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like now you're going to fucking do this shit to your mom too? Like how despicable do you have to be?
Yeah. Just soulless, obviously.
Yeah, I feel really bad for Chuck. Like it's just so fucked. Lost his entire fucking family. Even his nephew is gone, has no idea where he is. Like, it's just so tragic.
It was Chuck partnered, married?
It did not mention.
I hope so, because
I hope so too.
imagine having to go on dates and be like, tell me about your family. And be like, well,
I'd be like, no.
girl, well, God.
I'd just send the link to
the article.
Accident, suicide, or murder.
Yeah, exactly.
Episode. I'd be like, you know what? Watch this before we go on the date. And
tell
then
me.
We're literally not going to bring this up ever again. Yeah.
It's like,
Thanks.
Pointer, don't have to deal with in-laws. I guess. Hey.
I guess.
That is so fucked. And I just don't understand how people can be so awful.
So awful. And like, they seemed like they had a great childhood. It seemed like their parents were both like loving and supportive and just like, not that anything makes an excuse to murder your parents, but like, okay, if they had been horribly abusive, something, I can understand how you got to this point. But like, you just did it for the money. You just did it for the fucking money.
Yeah. That you're going to blow through in a second because you've blown through all the other money that they've given you.
It's just so fucked.
I hate them. And I'm glad they're not here.
Yeah.
Fuck it. Fuck off. Fuck you.
Same.
But I adore you. Thank you for that story. What the fuck? Never heard of it, obviously.
Thank you for your story. I'd never heard of that.
Phantom funerals.
Phantom funerals.
Be on the lookout.
I don't know that I will be. I don't want to know. I told you. I don't want to know. But you're wonderful and amazing. And
thank you.
I love you. Thank you for that.
I love you. And we love you. This is another fucking horror podcast. I'm Monique Sanchez.
And I'm Amy Traden.
You can follow me on the gram at PinUpGirlMo.
You can follow me at Lobotomy, and that's Lobot.Amy.
Guys, go on our website, anotherfuckinghorrorpodcast.com. There you can find our Patreon, where you get a lot of extra goodies like Patreon exclusive episodes and first dibs on merch, which we are going to be dropping very soon, and live events that will also be announced pretty soon. So you don't want to miss any of that. So check out our website, anotherfuckinghorrorpodcast.com, so that you can be abreast of all the fun things. Also, if you like the show, please tell your friends and leave us a rating and review and subscribe, because that helps us out to get more visibility so that hopefully we can do this full time sooner rather than later. But as always, we are so fucking obsessed with you. Thanks for being rad as fuck. Keep it cute.
Keep it creepy.
Bye.
Bye.